Young Marquis Shen loved using me as a human shield more than anything else. A flower-viewing banquet? Absolutely not. Li Wu had already declared that if I dared to go out and flirt with flowers or chase the moon, she would scratch my face to shreds. A refined gathering of scholars? No, no, no. Li Wenwu had said that those sour pedantic literati would never allow me to associate with them. Drinking through the night? Even less possible. If even the faintest trace of alcohol clung to me, Li Wenwu would lock me inside a wine vat for the entire night and refuse to let me out at palace banquets. He would bring me up the moment he opened his mouth. I had never been eloquent. Before I could even offer an explanation, my reputation had already been ruined by him. In the end, I could only marry Chenling as his wife. After we married, I watched with my own eyes as he tangled with my maidservant, his every word dripping with smug satisfaction. If I don't destroy her reputation, how can I possibly stay by her side? Don't worry, I've already been slowly poisoning her food and drink. You've served that young lady for so many years. Replacing her shouldn't be difficult at all. I was so furious, my entire body trembled. One swing of my sword and one person fell. I sent them all to the Yellow Springs. In the end, I was thrown into prison for killing my husband and died filled with hatred. When I opened my eyes again, I had actually returned to that same palace banquet from years ago. From the cold, gloomy prison cell to the brightly lit, warm feast, my stiff fingertips trembled faintly. I narrowed my eyes, still unable to fully come back to my senses, until a familiar, evasive voice drifted to my ear. Brother Ron, it's not that I don't want to go, it's just that Li Wenwu is far too strict. You know how she is. Last time, I only exchanged a few extra words with her maidservant and she caught me and scolded me for half the day. Huh, who asked our mothers to be best friends? If I go against her wishes even slightly, she'll run straight to my mother and file a complaint. There's nothing I can do. It's not like I'm that pitiful. I've been used to her temper since I was a child. Chenling's voice wasn't loud, yet it carried with perfect clarity, as if he deliberately wanted everyone at the banquet to hear. Today was the Flower Appreciation Banquet, hosted by Her Majesty the Empress. Those invited were all the talented young masters of marriageable age from the great families of the capital. Chenling openly mentioned me, which was no different from announcing to the entire world that our relationship was extremely close, while I was the jealous, overbearing one, completely unworthy of any marriage discussion. Sure enough, the noble ladies behind us covered their mouths and giggled softly. At the nearby tables, the young masters from aristocratic families quietly pushed my name card aside. They clasped their hands toward Chenling and teased loudly, "If that's the case, I'm afraid only Brother Chen in this entire world can tolerate that young lady from the Li family. We've long heard that the women of the Li family are fierce and take after their mother. Now it seems the rumors are true. In the future, when Brother Chen enters court, won't he end up with a bruised face like Li Yuanwei every single day? Brother Chen, aren't you simply ridding the people of a scourge? Brother Chen truly has great spirit. This little brother admires you greatly. All right, everyone stop joking. I'm fine, but I'm afraid it will damage Lady Li's reputation. That wouldn't be proper." The man covered his mouth and coughed lightly. His bearing was every inch the gentle, jade-like gentleman. Yet whether the words should not have been spoken, he had said them all. It had been the same in my previous life. I had never been good with words. Hearing those fabricated claims made my face burn red, and I didn't know how to explain myself. But that reaction in the eyes of outsiders looked like silent admission. People said young Marquis Chen and the daughter of the Ai family were a pair of happy enemies, one willing to strike, the other willing to endure. Those words eventually reached Her Majesty the Empress. She kindly bestowed a marriage between us, but the truth had never been like that from the very beginning. I had never held any romantic feelings for Chenling. In the days that followed, my hatred for him ran as deep as the sea. We were irreconcilable. Returning to this palace banquet once more, perhaps the heavens had heard my cry and granted me another chance to begin again. Unlike my previous life, where I could only swallow my grievances in silence, this time I would not let that petty man have his way, no matter how much face I lost. I clenched my fists and strode straight into the center of the banquet. When I spoke, my voice rang even louder than Chenling's. "Young Marquis Chen, do not speak nonsense. Although our elders share a cordial relationship, you and I have had very little private contact. The number of sentences we have ever spoken to each other has not even reached 10. Where does this talk of disciplining come from? That day I argued with you only because you tried to lay hands on my maidservant. I merely spoke a few words to you, yet you have held a grudge until today. You are the legitimate son of a marquis manor, the proud son of heaven in the capital. You should understand how important a woman's reputation is. Today, before so many people, you fabricate such lies about me. What exactly are you trying to achieve?" The moment my words fell, the entire hall plunged into dead silence. Every gaze turned toward me, filled with shock, doubt, and scrutiny. I knew what they were thinking. How could a daughter from a military family speak so sharply in one breath? And young Marquis Chen, whom countless noble ladies regarded as their dream lover, had once flirted with a maidservant. Most importantly, I was nothing like the woman he had described. I was not the sort who loved him to the point of life and death, nor was I so jealous. I feared losing him to others. On the contrary, I would rather tear apart all pretense with him in front of everyone than allow any ambiguity to remain. That alone proved our relationship had already frozen solid. Those gazes, doubtful, curious, and malicious, kept sweeping over me. Chenling and Jinshuo stood there as if nothing were amiss. I did not avoid them. I simply stood calmly and let them scrutinize me. But Jinshuo behind me could not maintain her composure. Her delicate face alternated between red and white, her lips were nearly bitten bloody, and her entire body trembled so violently she could barely stand. Seeing this, I sighed inwardly. In the past, no matter how furious I became, I would never have dragged a woman's reputation into the open like this. The moral standards of this era were far too harsh on women. Secret affairs between men and women clearly involved both parties. Yet only the woman would have her name destroyed and be despised by the world for the rest of her life. But having lived a second life, I had come to understand one truth. Not every woman in this world was worthy of my pity or protection. My maternal family was a martial clan. From childhood, I had trained in martial arts with my mother and was proficient with blade, spear, staff, and club. Because of this, I had always been particularly slow to understand matters between men and women. One day, Mother took me to the training grounds in the manor to practice horseback archery. While galloping at full speed, I suddenly saw Jinshuo's the maid, who usually attended me, being cornered by Qinling. His hand rested on her waist, his face pressed close to hers. He was slowly leaning down, clearly intending to do something indecent. Jinshuo was a maid my father had purchased during a journey away from home. She was 1 year younger than me, gentle and obedient. From childhood, she had followed at my side, learning whatever I learned. Though she disliked riding, she was exceptionally skilled in zither, go calligraphy, and painting. Over time, even her appearance came to resemble mine somewhat. I treated her like a younger sister and had always protected her, fearing her soft nature would invite bullying. As for Chenling, outsiders praised him as elegant and refined with an impeccable reputation. But in my eyes he had a frail physique and looked like nothing more than a useless powdered pretty boy. Moreover, if he truly admired Jinshuo, he could have sent a matchmaker to discuss marriage openly. There was no need to corner and force himself on her in secret like this. Rage surged to the crown of my head. I spurred my horse forward and lashed my whip straight across Chenling's back. Even after scolding him thoroughly, my anger had not subsided. I even brought Mother to confront his mother and demand justice. At the time, I had only been desperate to protect Jinshuo's reputation and settle accounts with Chenling. I completely failed to notice the flash of shame and resentment in the depths of her eyes. Nor did I see her fair hands clutching his lapel, half pushing him away, half welcoming him. Only later did I learn. They had long been having an affair in secret. They even enjoyed deliberately staging their flirtations in places where I might vaguely see them. My wholehearted passion had been nothing but a joke for others to laugh at from beginning to end, being publicly refuted by me in front of everyone. Chenling's expression turned ugly. But he was, after all, one of the capital's most outstanding young masters. In just a few breaths, he recovered his usual graceful demeanor. With a sharp snap, he closed his folding fan. Slightly bowing, he clasped his hands toward the crowd. "I've made a fool of myself before you all, Lady Li. This is because I was angry. She refused to listen to my advice and willfully attended this palace banquet. She is deliberately throwing a tantrum. It is all this Chen's fault. I will punish myself with 3 cups. I hope everyone will not hold it against Lady Li. She is not a bad person, merely a little hot-tempered." The moment he finished speaking, the gaze he turned on me became mocking and sarcastic. Whispers rippled through the banquet. "I've never seen a woman so jealous to monopolize her man. She even dares to slander young Master Chen's reputation. She doesn't even look in the mirror to see who she is. She truly thinks she's some rare treasure. Only young Marquis Chen, with his good temper, could tolerate her. What's wrong with taking concubines? Which household these days doesn't have the husband taking concubines? She truly comes from a military family, so overbearing and willful. It's really hard on young Marquis Chen. Amid the mocking laughter, I stood alone, trembling with rage. I had spoken the truth. Why would no one believe me? Why could people who knew nothing judge others with the worst possible malice? Chenling reached out and tugged at the corner of my sleeve. He wore a smile at the corners of his eyes and brows, elegant and courteous, yet in places others could not see. A trace of smugness leaked through. Don't make a scene, Wenwu. Don't joke about this. I've long admired you. If you don't marry me, who else would you marry? The certainty in his eyes was almost overflowing. I clenched my fists and couldn't help recalling my previous life. Back then, I had privately asked Chenling why he used my name to refuse those banquets when it was clearly he who didn't want to attend. Didn't he know it would put me in a difficult position? He had been stunned for a moment before lowering his head, his painted brows revealing a trace of melancholy. It troubled the young lady. This Chen admits his fault, but I only did so because I wanted the young lady to pay attention to me. I have loved you for many years and understand the Li family's ways. Today I swear to you Chenling will keep himself pure for life and never set foot in the pleasure quarters. There was none before, and there will be none in the future. I am willing to spend my entire life with you, just the two of us, holding hands until our hair turns white. At that time I still did not understand love. Looking at his burning gaze and determined expression, I actually believed he truly loved me. Combined with the Empress's bestowed marriage, I half reluctantly, half willingly married him. But in just half a year my body, which could once lift a cauldron, came so weak, I could not even thread a needle. Mother's death shattered my soul. On the day I returned from mourning, I came home earlier than planned. The moment I pushed open the door I caught Chenling and Jinchuo tangled together. At most another half year and Li Wenwu will be finished. By then she'll be the legitimate daughter of the Li family. What is there to fear? That meddlesome old hen has already been dealt with. Her father dotes on her so much, he probably won't say anything. Chenling's wife should have been a woman of outstanding talent and virtue, with an orchid heart and jade-like quality like you. As for that vulgar woman, just looking at her dirties my eyes. The truth was laid bare, so that was how it was. The world spun. Blood gushed from my mouth. Even though my limbs were soft and powerless, I gritted my teeth, drew the sword hanging in the room, and charged forward to stab through both people on the bed. It was the same now. Looking at Chenling's arrogant face, I hated that I could not immediately draw my sword and cut his throat. But the lesson from my previous life had been written in blood. Chenling was the person the Marquis Manor had poured years of effort into cultivating. If I killed him like this, the Marquis Manor would never let Mother and me go. Yet seeing everything about to repeat the same mistakes, panic flooded my chest. Faced with those arrogant eyes, my mind heated up and I blurted out, "Who said I have to marry you? I already have someone in my heart. Moreover, the person I like is 1,000 times better than you. Why should I waste my effort managing you, while you throw away a priceless treasure for something completely worthless?" After this bold declaration, the smile on Chenling's face stiffened. His eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a trace of surprise. In my heart I felt a flash of satisfaction, but it was immediately followed by regret. I must have been possessed for so many years. I had rarely interacted with men. Where would I find someone in my heart? Chenling immediately pressed for an answer. I could not reply. If I admitted I was lying now, I would only lose more face under everyone's focused gazes. I could only grit my teeth and slowly raise my hand. My fingertips swept across each young master present. Whoever I pointed to immediately avoided and retreated, as if afraid of being contaminated by something filthy. Seeing this, the corners of Chenling's lips curled into a victorious smile once more. "Li Wenwu, stop lying to me. We grew up together. How could I not understand you? It's him, isn't it?" My fingertips stopped. I cut him off. "The person in my heart is him. I have observed carefully. From beginning to end, there is only one person in this entire banquet who neither mocked nor secretly sneered. Throughout the whole time, he kept his head down, not knowing what he was doing. I can only take this gamble." Hearing this, everyone's expressions changed at once. They followed the direction of my finger. The person I pointed to seemed to still not understand what was happening. After a long while, he slowly raised his head. His round cheeks still carried a hint of childishness, and his dark bright eyes were as clean as a child's. Yet his appearance was exquisite to the extreme. Even the blooming crabapple flowers today would feel ashamed and pale in comparison before him. Only then did I notice that although he sat in a corner, his table was much larger than the others. The food was not light like ours, but tossed chicken legs, pork trotters, and meat jelly mixed with candied fruits. Looking at the traces at the corners of his mouth, It seemed he had not raised his head earlier because he was still eating with great relish. At that moment, seeing me point at him, the youth jumped in fright. The chicken leg in his hand fell onto the table with a plop. He was stunned for a long time before his ears gradually turned red. Carrying a hint of inquiry, he held out a skewer of candied hawthorn coated in white sugar toward me. I was somewhat tongue-tied, staring at his face. I only felt it looked familiar, yet I could not remember where I had seen him before. Qinling beside me froze. He bowed respectfully and said, "This minister greets Third Highness. In reply to your highness, my fiancée is still young and does not understand things. She unintentionally disturbed your highness. I beg your highness to forgive her." Third Highness. The youth I had casually pointed to was actually the rumored third prince Jialan. I had heard some things about this prince before. Although his status was noble, he had been simple-minded since childhood. He spoke and recognized characters much slower than ordinary people. Clearly he had reached the age of capping, yet no family was willing to marry their daughter to him. My fingertip trembled slightly. Regret flooded my chest out of so many people. Why did I have to point to this one? I didn't even know if he understood what was happening right now. Those round eyes seemed to truly carry a hint of bewilderment. He furrowed his brows slightly, looked at Qinling, then looked at me, as if trying hard to understand what had just been said. After a while the youth pouted, looking unwilling, and slowly lowered the candied hawthorn in his hand. Qinling, seeing this, clearly breathed a sigh of relief. But how could I let him have his way? I strode over to the third prince's side, and took the candied hawthorn he had not yet put down. "How did your highness know that this minister's daughter likes candied hawthorn the most?" When Her Majesty the Empress and His Majesty entered the Great Hall, what they saw was exactly this scene. Jialan and I each holding a candied hawthorn, our hands looking as if they were tightly clasped together. His face was flushed red. He wanted to look at me, but did not dare. I curved my eyes in a smile and comfortably let him sneak glances. It seems our little Lan really likes this young lady quite a bit. It was not until His Majesty smiled with squinted eyes and spoke that everyone came back to their senses and knelt in unison to pay respects. I hurriedly bowed and replied, "In reply to your Majesty, this minister's daughter's name is Li Wenwu. My mother is the legitimate daughter of General Zhen Yuan. Third Highness possesses a childlike heart, innocent and pure. Who meets him would like him. And naturally, this minister's daughter has also developed feelings of admiration for him. Since it is so." His Majesty's spirit immediately lifted. His gaze swept between us. "Lanner has also reached the age of capping. If the daughter of the Eli family likes him, then let me decide bestow." He had not finished speaking when a panicked voice cut him off. "No." Qinling suddenly raised his head and stared fixedly at His Majesty and the Empress. Realizing his breach of etiquette, Qinling hurriedly prostrated himself. "Your Majesty is unaware, but in truth this minister and Lady Li have long developed feelings for each other." The words just now were merely the young lady throwing a tantrum. "I beg your Majesty and Her Majesty to forgive me." Hearing this, the Empress's expression darkened. She looked toward me and frowned slightly. If she has long had feelings for young Marquis Chen, why would she dare use the imperial heir as a joke, your Majesty? This woman does not understand the bigger picture and is unworthy of stepping onto the stage. Our Lanner absolutely cannot marry someone like that. Seeing that Qinling was still pestering endlessly, I grew anxious. I leaned over and gently kissed Jialan's peach blossom cheek. A chorus of sharp gasps sounded throughout the great hall. I tried to keep my voice steady. In reply to Her Majesty, this minister's daughter was not joking. This minister's daughter truly admires Third Prince your Highness and harbors absolutely no falsehood. The fair face instantly flushed, completely red. Qinling's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. His Majesty slammed his hand on the table and immediately ordered ink to be ground, preparing an imperial edict to bestow marriage between me and Jialan on the grounds of allowing me to grow closer to the third prince. His Majesty kept me in the palace. On the day Mother entered the palace to see me, she happened to encounter Jialan crying loudly because he was not allowed to eat chicken legs. Mother's expression was complicated as she looked at him, wiping all his tears and snot onto my clothes. She was just about to sigh when she turned her head and saw me also looking at her with red eyes. In the next second, I threw myself into her arms and burst into tears. Mother was stunned. The palace maids were stunned. Even Jialan's non-stop crying instantly fell silent. In my previous life, Mother died from falling off a horse, but she was a woman who had grown up on horseback. How could she die from simply falling off a horse? Only later did I learn that Qinling had bribed servants to feed the horse a strong stimulant, causing it to go mad and bolt. In the end, mother was thrown into a deep ravine, even her bones were gone. If I had not been blind enough to marry Chenling, mother would never have been implicated by me and died young. This was something I could never forgive myself. For every time I tossed and turned in the dark prison, I cried through the night. Having lived again, faced with that familiar, reassuring scent, my tears simply would not stop. Thought I had been wronged and immediately flew into a rage. Who dares to bully my daughter? Your father is General Zhen Yuan. The imperial military warrant is still worshipped in our ancestral hall. Come, mother will take you to demand justice. With a sharp crack, the whip lashed down, sending dust flying. The palace servants knelt in terror, prostrating on the ground. Zhaolan snorted lightly and hid behind the rockery, clutching his head. I hurriedly pulled mother's hand and led her back into the room. I recounted everything that had happened at the palace banquet in detail. We also have to thank Third Highness. If it weren't for His Highness, your daughter truly wouldn't have known what to do today. Rebellious. Mother was so angry she could barely stand it. That brat from the Chen family is still young, yet he dares to fabricate lies about you. He's exactly like his mother, completely lacking in propriety. She intended to go to the Chen family to demand justice, but I stopped her. Chenling is eloquent. We have no evidence. I'm afraid we won't be able to argue against him. Moreover, he is the legitimate son of the Marquis Manor, and has been carefully cultivated by the Chen family for many years. This small matter can't harm him at all. On the contrary, it might give him an opportunity to latch on to us. It's better this way. Not long from now comes the Imperial Spring Hunt. All the nobles of the capital will participate. The mountains and forests are dense, and wild beasts roam everywhere. There are many things that can be done there. As for Jinchuo, I want to keep her. If Chenling has any schemes, he will definitely carry them out through her. She is the fuse, who the final flame will burn. We don't know yet. On the day of the spring hunt, the sky was clear, and the wind cool thanks to Zhaolan's blessing. It was the first time I rode in the imperial carriage. These past few days I had also come to understand him a little. Although he was a prince, his temperament was still like a child's. He liked whatever caught his eye, and never grew tired of it. The palace servants always indulged him in the carriage. Zhaolan asked me to give him pork trotters to eat. I shook my head and refused. Your stomach isn't good. Eating too much greasy food during the day will give you a stomachache at midnight. The first time I stayed overnight in his sleeping chambers, a figure suddenly appeared at the head of the bed in the middle of the night, almost scaring me to death. Zhaolan lowered his head, exactly like a child who had done something wrong, and said, there was someone in his stomach hitting him. He begged me for help. I was both angry and amused and used a bit more force. He immediately widened his wet eyes, feigning grievance, and repeatedly cried out his innocence. I comforted myself that he was still just a child. It wasn't too late to start educating him from now on. At this moment, upon hearing he could not eat meat, Zhaolan's eyes immediately reddened. He was very good at acting spoiled. He lowered his head and twisted his handkerchief, looking as if he had suffered a great injustice. I hardened my heart and patted his head, coaxing softly. Be good, it's not that I'm not letting you eat. You just have to eat slowly, eat less, and eat in moderation. When you eat, you must have vegetables with it. While we were talking, we arrived at our destination. I helped Zhaolan down from the carriage and casually straightened his clothes. At that moment, I always felt a burning gaze from behind staring at me. When I turned my head, sure enough, the person standing not far away was Chenling. The man wore a neat black outfit and rode a tall, handsome horse. His dashing appearance made the noble ladies around him continuously glance over. Our eyes met. He raised his eyebrows and moved his lips soundlessly. Li Wenwu. I felt so disgusted I almost vomited. Just then Zhaolan pulled my hand. I took the opportunity to hold it under Chenling's ugly expression. I raised my head high and led the horse away. With the imperial edict bestowing the marriage, everyone tacitly assumed Zhaolan and I would ride the same horse. I chose a gentle white horse. As soon as I helped Zhaolan mount, I felt the corner of my sleeve being tugged lightly. It was Jinchuo. She bit her lip, wanting to speak but hesitating. Young lady, after all, you are still an unmarried daughter, riding the same horse with a man. I'm afraid it's a bit inappropriate. I looked at the rarely seen tension on her face. After a moment, I nodded agreeably. That makes sense. I took out a handful of candies and stuffed them into the hands of the somewhat uneasy youth on the horse. Be good and wait here, I'll hunt a wild rabbit for you. I chose a majestic red-coated horse and let Jinchu help me into my riding clothes. As I turned to mount, she took out a fragrant pouch and said she had stayed up all night embroidering it for me to pray for safety. Her embroidery skills had always been excellent. I did not suspect anything and casually tied it to my waist. Not long after, the sound of the horn echoed. The spring hunt officially began. It would last 3 days. Whoever hunted the most prey or the largest prey would win. The Imperial hunting grounds had dedicated managers and were only opened once a year. The grass and trees were lush, and the shade covered the sky. In just a short while I had hunted 2 wild rabbits and 1 pheasant. After traveling halfway, I dismounted to rest and drink water. I casually felt at my waist and discovered it was empty. Where's the fragrant pouch? I knew the pouch Jincho gave me definitely had a problem, but no matter what drug was inside, I had already taken the antidote for all poisons beforehand, so wearing it was fine. I was still wondering what they were planning when the hunt had only just begun, and the pouch had already disappeared. Could it have fallen off during the long ride? If an innocent person picked it up and got implicated, what then? I was hesitating whether to go back and search, when fierce wind whistled from not far away. A white figure rushed forward at great speed, piercing through the forest. It was getting closer and closer to me. The person wore a pine-patterned robe and moved with extreme speed, like thunder tearing across the sky. In the blink of an eye he arrived before me. It was the appearance of a refined youth in brocade clothes on a fine horse. But when I looked carefully, the person on the horse was clearly leaning sideways, about to fall off at any moment. I hurriedly reached out. In the next second, the person was pulled entirely into my arms. Upon closer inspection, it was actually Xiaolan. The gentle white horse I had carefully chosen earlier was now like it had gone mad. Its eyes were bloodshot as it charged straight toward my red horse. It kept rubbing its head against the red horse's neck, continuously chasing and pressing close. Before long, the red horse was also snorting hot breaths and charging straight into the depths of the forest with it. What on earth is going on? While I was still confused, the person in my arms uncomfortably rubbed against me, exhaling a scorching breath. His originally neat collar was pulled askew, revealing a glimpse of porcelain-white skin that flushed with a faint layer of red along with his rapid breathing, and in his arms was clearly the fragrant pouch Jincho had given before departure. When exactly had he picked it up? I hadn't noticed at all. Big sister, I'm hot at this point. No matter how slow I was, I had already understood. Xiaolan had been drugged. The youth's face was like peach blossoms. His eyes were covered in mist. He stared fixedly at me without blinking even once. His gaze was full of youthful longing and bewilderment from not being relieved. To be honest, I had always felt a sense of guilt towards Xiaolan. Previously at the palace banquet, I had used his simplicity and noble status to escape being forced into marriage by Chenling. Moreover, the drug had originally been meant for me. Somehow it ended up implicating him. He still had a child's temperament and did not understand how many disgusting and dirty things existed in this world. How was I supposed to explain? Seeing Xiaolan in such discomfort, the guilt in my heart was almost about to burst through my chest. I clenched my hands, then carried him onto my shoulder and walked straight into the depths of the dense forest. This wasn't my first time coming to this hunting ground. According to my memory, there was a river not far away. The water from melting ice was bitingly cold, but it should be able to help Xiaolan alleviate the drug's effects, somewhat in the river. While I was helping Xiaolan remove his clothes, I heard movement from the reeds on the other side. Damn it. Weren't they supposed to have a beauty coming to bathe by the river? We've waited so long and still haven't seen her. Keep your voice down, you idiot. Do you want to be discovered? Sorry, big brother. At first I heard there would be noble ladies to play with today. I was afraid of losing face later, so I specially took the medicine beforehand. Now I really can't hold it anymore. In that instant I immediately understood. These were people Chenling had found. Seeing that he couldn't marry me, he wanted to take advantage of the chaos during the spring hunt to destroy my purity. A woman who lost her reputation, let alone the imperial family, even ordinary families would despise her like worn-out shoes. If no one was willing to marry her, she could only prove her innocence with death in the end. If I really became a discarded plaything, wouldn't I still be nothing but a thing in his hands afterward? Despicable. The legitimate son of a marquis manor actually using such underhanded methods. I gritted my teeth in hatred. At this moment Xiaolan was under the influence of the drug. I didn't want to get entangled too much with these two. But as soon as he touched the cold stream, he started playing happily. He suddenly dived forcefully into the water, splashing everywhere and creating a huge commotion. The two people heard the noise and appeared. I began to feel fortunate that I had taken the detoxifying pill beforehand. Although these two were rash, they coordinated extremely skillfully. Every move carried the killing intent of the military, making them extremely difficult to deal with. Weapons clashed back and forth. Jalan got bored of playing. He surfaced from the water and looked at us blankly. Big sister, what are you all doing? His fair skin shone dazzlingly under the sunlight, beautiful like a jade tree in the wind, pure, yet exquisite to the extreme. The shorter man, upon seeing him, immediately had his eyes light up. He excitedly shouted, "Big brother, this one is even more beautiful, I want him." A lewd smile hung on his face, making the youth in the water look even more pure and naive. He undid his belt while striding towards Jalan. "How dare you?" I was burning with anxiety, but the taller one took the opportunity to exploit my opening and fiercely slashed with his sword, flesh and blood flipping over. Yet I also didn't know where I got the strength from. I countered with a sword strike and decisively slashed across his neck. Then I immediately rushed toward Jalan. I already owed him so much. Even if I had to risk this life of mine, I had to protect him well. But for some unknown reason, as soon as I stepped into the water, my feet felt like they had stepped on something soft. The more I walked, the more strength I lost. The river water was stirred into turbidity, submerging my head. Not far away, there seemed to be a miserable scream. I couldn't see anything clearly in my dazed state. I choked on several mouthfuls of water. I didn't know how much time had passed before I was pulled up by someone. Leaning against that warm chest, I struggled to wake up, but my nose was filled with a cloyingly sweet fragrance that made my head spin. I simply couldn't open my eyes. Reluctantly, I went limp like a boneless worm and collapsed once more. Before losing consciousness, an extremely pleasant male voice sounded by my ear, cold like jade stones clashing, carrying a faint, distant laugh. "My beloved consort is truly foolish." It made this prince laugh so hard I almost couldn't draw my blade. When I opened my eyes again, the deep pool was quiet. Only the occasional chirping of birds could be heard. The wounds on my body no longer hurt. I hugged my chest and slowly sat up. My face felt wet and cold. Jalan was not far from me. The youth was curled beneath a tree, his face deathly pale. His moon-white robes were somehow stained dark red. Was it blood? Whose blood? Where were those two men? But no matter what I asked, he remained silent. His black hair was disheveled. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, the corners slightly red. He stared at me quietly. It seemed he had been frightened. My heart ached. I reached out to caress his face, softly coaxing him with a few words, then checked his entire body. Seeing his clothes were still properly worn and he had no wounds, I finally felt relieved. I told him to stay obediently in place and wait for me while I returned alone to the stream. Mother had taught me, when pulling weeds, one must pull them up by the roots. When alive, see the person. When dead, see the corpse by the riverbank. I saw as I wished the tall man whose throat I had slashed fallen in the forest, completely without breath. The shorter one floated face down on the water's surface. He looked like he had been dead for a long time. Dead? But I clearly remembered he had jumped into the water without hesitation. If he didn't know how to swim, why was he so calm? Moreover, when I entered the water, my legs had suddenly gone soft. I prided myself on being a decent swimmer, and I hadn't had any cramps. Thinking back now, it was more like something had wrapped around them. I bent down to examine the riverbed and check if the shorter man had any wounds. Suddenly, a soft groan came from behind. "Big sister, I'm cold." I didn't know when Jalan had followed me. He hugged himself, looking at me pitifully, his steps unsteady as if he would collapse in the next moment. I hurriedly ran over to support him. My hands felt a patch of cold stickiness. Without thinking much, I immediately began gathering firewood to start a fire. Right now, both horses had run off somewhere. If we wanted to walk out of this forest, it would probably take quite some time. I didn't know if His Majesty had discovered Jalan was missing and sent people to search. Whether anyone came to rescue us or not, the most urgent matter now was to dry Jalan's clothes. He absolutely could not catch a chill. His water-soaked clothes had become both cold and heavy, clinging tightly to his body. I slowly helped Jalan remove them one by one. His fair skin gradually revealed a faint pink layer. His body trembled slightly under my hands. I lowered my head and looked at that certain part of his clothing which was still tinted. I couldn't help but click my tongue. Why is it still like that? Clearly he had been soaked in the bitingly cold river water and had worn wet, cold clothes for half a day, yet it still couldn't help him calm down. The temperature under my palm grew hotter and hotter. I suddenly realized that apart from his immature mind, Jalan's body was already that of a fully grown man. In terms of age, he was even 3 years older than me. If it weren't for his mental issues, it wouldn't have been my place to care for him so meticulously. As if burned, I immediately withdrew my hand. Under Jalan's gaze, both innocent and burning, grabbed his clothes and turned to run away as if fleeing. The sun gradually set in the west. While I was directing Jalan to put his clothes back on by himself, footsteps sounded from not far in the forest. Search carefully, her horse is nearby, so she definitely hasn't gone far. Remember, no matter what you see later, you must insist that Li Wenwu has lost her purity. Scream loudly for me. It's best if you draw everyone here. A woman who has completely lost her innocence. I'd like to see which man would still dare to marry her. By then, even if she kneels before me and offers all the estates and horse ranches from her maternal family as dowry to beg me to marry her, I might not agree. It was Chenling, the imperial spring hunt. He dared to secretly release outsiders inside. That's already a grave crime, and drugging people to catch them in adultery? He's dreaming. He doesn't know that the 2 pieces of trash he found have already gone cold. Very soon, he himself will follow in their footsteps. Before the spring hunt began, Mother and I had already laid plans to deal with Chenling. If the fragrant pouch hadn't been picked up by Zhao Lan and ruined the plan, Chenling would probably no longer be alive right now. Thinking of this, I immediately stamped out the fire and carried Zhao Lan, running quickly through the trees. After running some distance, I placed Zhao Lan on a tree branch and instructed him not to move. No matter what, I would return shortly. My night vision was extremely good. Relying on my agile body, I moved through the branches and vines. The cold wind whipped across my cheeks and my heart was filled with the pleasure of impending revenge. Not long after, I arrived above Chenling's group. They had just found the recently extinguished fire and were angrily searching everywhere, completely forgetting to look up. I opened the pouch and poured it down close to my body. The dark red liquid poured down, and at the same time I let out a series of high-pitched, sharp wolf howls that echoed continuously through the dark, silent forest. The sound was particularly eerie and terrifying. The people below looked at each other and huddled closer together. Only Chenling completely tore off his hypocritical mask. He anxiously shouted threats into the forest. Li Wenwu, come out, I won't let you go. As long as you kneel and kowtow to admit your mistake, lick my feet and serve me happily, I will still grant you the status of a concubine in the Marquis Manor. Being found by me is only a matter of time. My brothers aren't the vegetarian type either. Who told you to be so ignorant at the beginning? If you had followed me earlier, how would you have encountered this disaster? He wasn't wrong. In my memory, there had originally been no drug in the fragrant pouch. This was supposed to be an ordinary spring hunt. 3 days later, the 5th prince hunted the most prey. Chenling came in second. His Majesty was greatly pleased and bestowed rewards, even marrying Chenling's cousin to the 5th prince along with countless gold, silver, and jewels. But this time I had been reborn. Chenling probably wouldn't have such good fortune anymore. From the tree I saw very clearly that more and more dark, deep green eyes began appearing around Chenling. They were organized and purposeful, silently approaching step by step. In just a breath, the shouting suddenly fell silent. A miserable scream rang out. 2 large bloody holes appeared on Chenling's neck, and fresh blood gushed out. His face was full of terror. He desperately clutched his neck, as if he completely didn't understand what he had done to attract so many vicious wolves. The smell of blood further stimulated their ferocity and wild nature. Those filthy people were torn into pieces. Not a single one escaped. When I returned to Zhao Lan's side, he was obediently sitting on the tree, swinging his legs out of boredom. Seeing me return, he smiled sweetly. I carried him down from the tree. On his moon-white robe were stuck a few strands of brownish-yellow fur. Wolf fur under the moonlight, it wasn't very clear. I brushed it off for him with a calm expression. 3 days later, the spring hunt ended. I led Zhao Lan out and nodded slightly to Mother, who had come to welcome us. She immediately let out a heavy sigh of relief. Not long after, the young masters from aristocratic families appeared one after another with their prey. Each one was beaming with joy. Outside the grounds, Marquis Chen had been waiting, and not seeing Chenling had begun to grow anxious. His Majesty and the Empress were no less worried, because the 5th prince had also not appeared. I remembered that in my previous life, the 5th prince had killed a tiger and carried it out with great majesty, striding forward on the main path to claim first place. By the timing, he should have appeared by now. His Majesty's and the Empress's expressions grew increasingly somber. They immediately dispatched the imperial guards to enter the forest to search. The torchlight illuminated the mountains and forests for a long time. Only fragmented human bones covered in flesh were found. The only 2 intact corpses were the 2 pieces of trash Chenling had found to harm me. Perhaps because they were at the edge of the forest, they hadn't been completely eaten by wild beasts. When the corpses were carried out, I still craned my neck to take a look. The shorter one had been soaked in water until he was swollen and white on his chest. I could vaguely see wounds with flesh turned outward. It looked extremely terrifying. The situation didn't look good. Survival was unlikely. The Empress and Madame Chen fainted on the spot. His Majesty flew into a rage and immediately ordered a strict investigation. I stared at the wound on the shorter man's body, and a thought gradually formed in my mind. I clearly remembered that after stepping into the water, I had sunk the sword in my hand had also been lost during my struggles. I had always thought I had retrieved my sword through sheer will and carried Jialan ashore. As for the shorter man, I thought he had drowned because he didn't know how to swim. But just now I had clearly seen sword wounds on his body. Who had inflicted those wounds? Could it be that besides me there had been a second person who knew swordsmanship present at the time? And the arm I felt before losing consciousness, along with that cold, almost emotionless sentence, hadn't been an illusion either. I looked at Jialan, who was eating heartily in the carriage, and wanted to speak but hesitated. Your Highness, when we fell into the water, that is, when you and I both fell into that river, did you see any strangers? Hearing this, he stopped his movements and stared at me blankly for a while before nodding. I quickly pressed, who was he? Do you still remember what he looked like? He thought for a moment, then shook his head. All right, I shouldn't have expected anything. But I always feel like I've overlooked something extremely important, something that could help me find the truth. Jialan and I could not return to the palace. His Majesty ordered the Ministry of Justice to thoroughly investigate the disappearance of the fifth prince and Chenling. Jialan, I, and everyone related to the spring hunt were taken to the Ministry of Justice for temporary detention and could be interrogated at any time. After the Vice Minister arrived, I honestly reported that Jialan had been drugged as well as how I had killed those two pieces of trash. However, I hid the part about pouring wolf blood and imitating wolf cub cries to lure the wolf pack to kill Chenling's group. I had done that matter extremely covertly. It absolutely could not attract attention. I just hadn't expected they would also want to question Jialan. Lady Li, we are only following procedure. His Highness's words are only for reference. Your Highness, may I ask if what Lady Li just said is true? The two vice ministers, one asking one recording, had solemn expressions. We need to confirm with you once more. From the moment you entered the hunting grounds, Lady, that is, the one beside you now, has always been by your side protecting you, and has never left even half a step. The door closed, and the room once again fell into silence. I looked at the obedient youth before me and spoke softly. Why did you? My hand under the table had nearly crumpled the corner of my skirt. If Jialan told the truth, I would definitely be taken away for strict investigation. And if the true cause of Chenling's death was revealed, the Marquis Manor would absolutely not let it go. They wouldn't stop until they had peeled a layer of skin off me. At that moment, I truly thought I was finished. Unexpectedly, the youth was still as innocent and pure as ever. He stretched out his arms and hugged me tightly, nodding heavily. In the cold water, Big Sister hugged me. Big Sister won't leave. Both vice ministers were still young. Seeing us so intimate, their faces flushed slightly, as if afraid of seeing something they shouldn't. They immediately stood up and took their leave. I breathed a sigh of relief, but then felt something was wrong. Jialan had actually lied. He had never lied before. Or rather, he fundamentally didn't know how to lie. He only said whatever he thought. Big Sister, don't go. Looking at his obedient brows and eyes full of dependence, I suddenly reacted. Could it be that he didn't understand the two vice ministers' questions at all? He just thought they wanted to take me away, so he hugged me tightly and wouldn't let go. I thought carefully and felt that must be it. Jialan's temperament was the purest. Teaching him to deceive people would probably be even harder. Unexpectedly, things had accidentally deviated from the plan and ultimately saved my life. The large stone in my heart finally fell. I turned and wiped the corner of his mouth, then stroked the youth's soft hair. His black hair cascaded down like brocade and silk, thick, smooth, and soft. I curved my lips in a smile and said softly, "All right, Big Sister won't go. I'll stay here with Alan." The youth contentedly buried his head in my arms, rubbing back and forth so comfortable he let out soft hums. Not long after, the Ministry of Justice's investigation results came out. Young Marquis Chen had colluded with Lady Li's maidservant, with the intention of harming Lady Li. Unexpectedly, the aphrodisiac had been accidentally inhaled by Third Prince, Your Highness. Fortunately, Lady Li had been brave and decisive. She subdued the two pieces of trash who wanted to violate the prince. As for Chenling and his accomplices, they were no match for the wolf pack in the forest, and were all buried in the wolves' bellies. As for the fifth prince, in the end they only found a piece of blood-stained brocade deep in the forest. That place was originally the territory of a fierce tiger. Based on the footprints at the scene, the Ministry of Justice deduced it was very likely he had been attacked by a tiger and swallowed until not even his bones remained. His Majesty originally didn't have many heirs. There were only 2 princes who had reached adulthood. Now one was lost. It was truly a tremendous blow. The 5th prince's birthmother was also Her Majesty the Empress. Upon hearing the news, she immediately fell ill and couldn't get up, suffering nightmares every day. She said her imperial son came to find her every midnight, saying he died tragically, was framed, his body was incomplete, and he died with his eyes open. The noble ladies and madams took turns entering the palace to attend to the Empress. I was also summoned into the palace by Zhaolan. Before leaving, Zhaolan began acting spoiled again. Nowadays, he really liked gnawing on my face as if eating candied hawthorn. I helplessly wiped the saliva off my face and struggled out of his arms. Right now, Her Majesty is seriously ill. As your Highness fiancé who hasn't yet entered the household, I must enter the palace to express my intentions no matter what he refused. I could only soften my voice, coaxing and threatening at the same time. Ilan, be good and wait at home for me. Absolutely do not run around. If when I return I find you weren't obedient, be careful. I won't let you eat pork trotters tonight. Kuning Palace. Because the Empress was having continuous nightmares. Even though it was already very late, the palace was still brightly lit with lamps and torches. Madams and noble ladies filled the great hall. Some I recognized, some I had never met, yet all had come in full force. The head maidservant beside the Empress led me into the hall. Her Majesty hasn't been well recently. All you young ladies are truly sincere. It's just that Her Majesty specifically named Lady Li to enter the inner hall to attend to her. Upon entering the inner hall, I discovered that Her Majesty the Empress was not as haggard as I had imagined. On the contrary, she was exquisitely made up, elegant and noble. Sitting high above, she quietly looked down at me, Lady of the Lai family. This palace has long heard of your reputation. Her voice sounded as if she had been crying for a long time, somewhat hoarse and low, but her shifting gaze carried scrutiny and a trace of certainty of victory. Back then, that boy from the Chen family begged so hard to marry you, yet you still refused. This palace already knew at that time that you were a hard bone to chew. I didn't know when even the head maidservant had withdrawn. Beside me there was no one left. Only the Empress's voice slowly echoed. Li Wenwu, do you know that the Chen family belongs to this palace? We once plotted great things together and have even begun to carry them out. Yet you clearly had the chance to rise to the heavens in one step, but chose a fool like the 3rd prince. But it's fine, it's not too late now. Tonight this world will change hands. This palace believes you are an intelligent young lady. As long as you take good care of the 3rd prince and don't let him talk too much, this palace and Marquishan will naturally support you in secret. With the added power of your maternal family, it won't be long before your child becomes the only bloodline of the imperial family. Well, is this temptation big enough? A thunderous realization struck straight into my heart. I stared silently at those beautiful, charming eyes for a long time, still unable to recover. Having lived 2 lives, I actually hadn't known that the Chen family belonged to the Empress. Memories from the past surfaced one by one in my mind, connecting bit by bit. I suddenly understood. No wonder that day at the palace banquet when Chenling slandered me, the Empress had gone along with the flow and hadn't wanted me to marry Zhaolan. No wonder, no matter which life it was, Chenling had insisted on marrying me no matter what. Clearly, the Chen family didn't lack wealth, so what he wanted was prestige and the support of my maternal family in the military. They had long set their sights on me as a chess piece to help seize the throne. No wonder in my previous life, after I killed Chenling and Jinchuo, the crown prince had flown into such a rage. Without listening to my explanation, he immediately threw me into the inner prison and only told outsiders that I was seriously ill, and Chenling was personally taking care of me. Now that I had been reborn and chosen the 3rd prince, I hadn't given Chenling the support he should have had. Added to the unexpected death of the 5th prince, the Chen family and the Empress were desperate and had shifted their target to Zhaolan. What about His Majesty then? His Majesty was in his prime. A bad premonition slowly crawled into my heart. Outside the window, the sounds of palace servants crying for help rose everywhere. Flames shot into the sky. Chaos reigned. Seeing me hesitate, the Empress flicked her sleeve and led me outside to the main hall, which had turned into a sea of fire, wanting me to witness His Majesty's death with my own eyes. Amid the raging flames, I could vaguely see a figure sitting on the supreme throne. Wearing a crown and dragon robes, his face was pitch black. The Empress laughed maniacally. Under the dancing firelight, her already beautiful brows and eyes became even more seductive. Zhao Kongxing, do you see? The one who wins in the end is me. It's me, Lady Li. Are you still not willing to give up? Obediently bring the third prince here. Don't worry. As long as he obediently acts as a puppet for this palace won't harm him. I looked at her indifferently, sighing inwardly. If the Chen family was the Empress's support, then I truly couldn't comply with her wishes. Old Marquis Chen and my maternal grandfather were old acquaintances. The two had followed the late emperor to conquer the realm, and had been infefted as marquis, and appointed as generals, illustrious for a time. Back then, my maternal grandmother had damaged her health giving birth to mother. My maternal grandfather had been heartbroken, so he only had one daughter. My mother for many years he had taught her with all his heart. She was upright and kind, but the Qin family was completely different. They had many descendants and countless branches. Previously, it hadn't been revealed. Only after I married into the family did I discover that for many years the Chen family had been using the imperial examinations to gradually insert their descendants into officialdom. They had also used their power to collude with salt merchants, monopolize trade, and siphon off the national treasury. Not only that, they had privately raised thousands of private soldiers in Jiangnan, committing robbery, murder, and every evil deed. Even for huge profits, they had smuggled and transported supplies to enemy nations. They fundamentally didn't care who the emperor was. A change of ruler was merely replacing the person sitting on the dragon throne. What they cared about was whether their family could prosper for 100 years, whether their descendants could live generation after generation under the shade of the family tree, making that tree grow larger and stronger, forever standing tall and never falling. As for the suffering of the common people, it had nothing to do with them. In my previous life, my power had been too small. By the time I reacted, there had been no choice left, but now it was different. In my veins flowed the blood of my maternal grandfather. He had been Marquis Jin Yuan, loyal and righteous, and had ultimately died on the battlefield far away protecting the rivers and mountains. Why couldn't I be like him, like mother, and stake everything for the rivers, mountains, and the realm in a grand manner? The realm could change hands, but it absolutely could not fall into the hands of those who didn't love the common people, whose eyes were filled only with calculations of profit. Seeing me expressionlessly draw the sword from the guard beside me, the Empress's face immediately changed. She raised her eyebrows in slight disbelief. Li Wenwu, right now the entire palace is in this palace's hands. Do you think you still have a way to refuse? I blinked and only said, let's try. My sword may not be dull. Facing several imperial guards alone, I can say, I have no chance of winning. But so what? Even if I die, I won't be a hunting dog for treacherous ministers. It's just a pity that Zhaolan will probably never wait for me again. Just as both sides were about to clash, a clear voice like clashing jade came from afar. Mother Empress, don't be hasty. The crowd immediately erupted in commotion. The soldiers who had been neatly arrayed, all retreated to both sides, making way. A face I hadn't expected walked leisurely into my view, like a gentle spring breeze slowly approaching us. He said casually, as you wished I have come, can you release my lady now? She is very foolish. Even if you act against her, winning won't bring you any glory. Beside the man, rows of fully armed soldiers poured in one after another, surrounding us in the middle. Archers and crossbowmen also appeared on the distant palace walls, simultaneously drawing their bowstrings, each aimed straight at us. I stared blankly at those usually clean and pure eyes. That soft, pinchable face now carried a trace of arrogance and a faint smile. He lowered his head and looked at the Empress as if looking at someone already dead. The ones shocked were not only me, but also the Empress. It's you? How can it be you all? Could it be that you have been deceiving me all along? You actually deceived me all this time? Damn it, a bunch of bastards. His Majesty in my impression had always been smiling with squinted eyes, amiable and approachable. Now his face was somber as water. He stepped out from the shadows. The flickering firelight made his expression dark and unfathomable. Surprised, or do you feel regret? Regret that the one being burned to death today is not your emperor, but the man you loved most. Surprised that Lanner is intelligent and patient, and has always been the prince I valued most. It turned out that the childhood sweetheart of the Empress back then had not been His Majesty but Marquis Chen. At that time, His Majesty was still the Prince of Huan. Upon meeting the Empress, he had fallen in love at first sight and personally came to propose. As for the Marquis, knowing he was away on campaigns year-round, and fearing he couldn't give the Empress a stable life, he had left with a heavy heart. The Empress had nodded and agreed to the marriage. But she had also made 3 agreements with His Majesty. 1 lifetime, 1 pair, she would be his only wife. His Majesty had agreed, but ultimately couldn't fulfill it. After the empress's first two children died, young one after another, he favored another woman who gave birth to the third Prince Jialan. The empress had been completely disappointed. Once when Marquis Chen entered the palace to report on official duties, under the cover of palace maids and eunuchs, she gave birth to the fifth prince. His Majesty had known all of this, but out of guilt, he chose to endure and keep the child. He just hadn't expected that in this life, Chenling's failed attempt to marry me would cause the things the Chen family had done in the military to be almost exposed. The fifth prince and the empress, in desperation, had used the methods they had once used against me on His Majesty. His Majesty had completely lost heart and no longer showed them any mercy. Hearing this, the empress's face turned deathly pale. She seemed to have all her strength drained and collapsed to the ground, muttering, "How can this be? If you hadn't been unable to endure and started poisoning me, perhaps I would have kept you for a while longer." Yuer didn't keep her promise. It was my fault to her. But she wouldn't go so far as to want my life, would she? Does she truly have no feelings left for me? The woman on the ground was stunned for a moment, then burst into wild laughter. What feelings? Perhaps you have forgotten, when my children left, it was I who personally buried them. Day and night I longed for them. I couldn't sleep peacefully. You loved me, and searched everywhere for famous doctors to treat me. But in the end, you found your way to that female physician's bed. The long nights were lonely. The cold moon was desolate. Night after night I slept alone beside my children's graves, shielding them from wind and rain. And what about you? Beauties filled your heart. You enjoyed the pleasures of clouds and rain to the fullest. My children's bones rotted in the yellow earth while your child was born crying loudly. Zhao Kongxing, you made me disgusted for this lifetime. Why should I still have feelings for you? Before anyone could stop her, the empress stood up and rushed into the sea of fire. She embraced Marquis Chen, who had already been burned beyond recognition. She seemed to be crying and laughing at the same time. Her mournful, desolate wail reached its peak. No blood needed to be shed. This palace coup thus ended amidst everyone's silence. The sword in my hand slowly fell to the ground. Someone pulled my hand and said softly, "My lady, can we still eat pork trotters when we go home tonight?" Only then did I truly understand where things had gone wrong. No matter how strong the drug in that fragrant pouch was, it could only affect a person through close contact. Jialan's white horse had been drugged by him. His main purpose had been to participate in this spring hunt. The death of the fifth prince was probably also related to him. "My lady, hug me." As soon as we returned to the sleeping chambers, Jialan acted as if nothing had happened and began acting spoiled again. I angrily pushed him away and said coldly, "If you keep pretending to be foolish, I'll beat you to death. What I hate most is people lying to me. You even dared to say I was foolish." I packed my luggage and prepared to return to my manor. After that spring hunt, Jinshuo was thrown into prison. My father rarely had a big argument with mother. He said Jinshuo was still young and had been deceived by others. He hoped mother could go to the Ministry of Justice to plead for leniency and release her. Mother refused. He then shouted loudly, "I've endured humiliation as the Ally family son-in-law for so many years and been mocked by the world without ever complaining. Now with just such a small request, you won't agree either?" People say that a 7-foot-tall man being controlled by a woman is a joke to the world. I see that it's truly too ridiculous. If you won't agree, then let's divorce and separate. Who else would want you after that? When I returned to the manor, mother's eyes were already red. She probably couldn't understand why father, who had always been respectful and harmonious with her, had suddenly become like a different person overnight. Clearly, when he married her, he had been gentle and attentive, indulging her in everything. Now, because of a maidservant, he had turned against her for the sake of harming his own daughter. I didn't feel it was appropriate to interfere in the elders' matters. I only brought all kinds of men in front of mother every day, some in long robes holding fans, some young generals in silver armor, and some lively, handsome youths. Finally, after a foreign Western region dancer fed her a grape, mother finally showed a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. I struck at the right moment with a fatal blow. "Mother, yesterday I caught father sending someone to deliver a message to Jinshuo. He told her to rest assured, as his own flesh and blood, no matter what, he wouldn't ignore her. As long as he used the threat of divorce to scare people, you would definitely compromise obediently." Mother divorced father. This was also the first case of a woman divorcing her husband in the Great Long Kingdom. Out of respect for mother being the legitimate daughter of General Zhen Yuan, and because I had the merit of protecting the third prince, after reporting to the court, His Majesty approved it. "My lady, in the future you won't abandon your husband, will you?" From now on, this husband will practice using his mouth to peel grapes for you, alright? I don't care. You've already seen my body completely. If you don't want me, tomorrow I'll hang myself on the city wall. Looking at Xiaolan, I truly couldn't understand. Clearly when he was young, he had been a fair, soft little child like a steamed bun. How had he grown into such a shameless rogue? Because of his birth mother's reasons, Xiaolan had not been valued in the palace since childhood. His Majesty, feeling guilty toward the Empress, had chosen to turn a blind eye to that situation. After the Empress gave birth to her own son, to protect himself, Xiaolan from a young age could only pretend to be foolish to survive. That year when I entered the palace, I happened to see several eunuchs surrounding Xiaolan. Relying on his young age and inability to speak clearly, they pretended to fall on him and refused to get up no matter what. Gradually, the struggling and shaking movements turned into ambiguous collisions. The eunuch's face flushed red. Ambiguous panting sounds came from his mouth, while the onlookers laughed with implicit understanding. The child beneath had delicate brows and eyes. He opened his innocent eyes that didn't understand the world. That obedient, confused appearance only made those people more excited. Although I didn't understand, I instinctively felt they were bullying him. Rage surged up. I lashed out with my whip. The flesh of several eunuchs immediately split open, and they cried out incessantly. I also told the head maidservant about this. In the end, those eunuchs were all executed. Throughout the entire process, that youth kept watching my every action intently. Later I saw him learn to push the palace maids away by stepping on his own robe hem. Only then did I leave with peace of mind. When he was young, he clearly looked like a soft white steamed bun. Who would have thought that he was completely black-bellied inside? I muttered my complaints. Unexpectedly, Xiaolan heard me. My lady, could it be that you don't like it? That day when you removed my clothes until only my undergarments remained. Hadn't you already seen it? I still remember your little face turned as red as candied hawthorn, making people unable to resist wanting to eat it. Ah, shut up! What do you mean black-bellied? You're just utterly shameless. In the end, Jinchuo still couldn't be saved. She was sentenced to beheading after autumn. Father cried with red eyes and came to beg mother, but was driven out by that western region youth. He was so angry he cursed while scolding. Li Jingguo, you have no shame, you die without dignity, you are rebellious and unfilial, inverting the proper order. So what? Mother replied indifferently. After all, it's your daughter who died first. One day later, it was said that father went out and accidentally stepped on a skewer of candied hawthorn, falling and becoming crippled. Another year passed, spring breeze brushed the face. I planned to take mother out to relieve her boredom. It just so happened that the western region youth also missed home. Mother planned to take him back to his hometown to visit relatives. As for the marriage agreement between me and Xiaolan, anyway, the wedding date hadn't been clearly stated. His Majesty had deceived us and, knowing he was in the wrong, didn't mention it again. When we arrived at the rest pavilion outside the city, a man in white was already standing there waiting. Mother looked carefully for a while, then breathed a sigh of relief. Your peach blossom debt has arrived. I'll go first. Xiaolan, who was addicted to pretending to be foolish, leaned against the pavilion pillar and spread his arms demanding a hug. I'll pretend I didn't see. The horse galloped past in front of him. Immediately after, cries of alarm came from behind. Somehow the man had fallen to the ground. His jade-white wrist was scraped raw in a patch. The corners of his eyes turned red. My lady, in the end I still reined in my horse. I looked down at him with lowered eyes. Young master, please go back. My horse is slow and can't carry a large statue like you. Just then, a majestic red-coated horse leading a small white foal slowly approached. Behind it was also an additional pure white horse. Xiaolan's face lit up with joy. Little horse, have you gained spiritual awareness? Have you come to repay your matchmaker? Just then, spring rain began to fall lightly. The spring path was covered in misty rain and flowers. The flowers swayed with the mountain spring colors. Amid the hazy rain, the warm spring breeze gently brushed across my face, then blew toward his. The corners of the youth's lips curved slightly, turning the maiden's tail of her eyebrows red as well.